Welcome. So tonight we're going to be exploring something that I like to call the Unified Harmonic Matrix. Wow, that's a big mouthful, isn't it? Unified Harmonic Matrix. Sounds like something out of a Matrix movie or sci-fi or Brazil. You ever see that movie from way back in the day? So insane. It's like dream worlds mash up with the real worlds, totally futurized with Blade Runner running in reverse or something like that. So what we're talking about today is unification of systems. And we're talking about not just unifying systems together, but doing it harmonically, which means recognizing that every system has its own role to play, its own song to sing, its own note in the harmony of the spectrum. And that you can take any system and just by understanding where it came from, how it started, what the perceptions were that generated that system, you can fit that system in with any other system in the universe, as long as the systems have some alignment to fundamental truths of experience. Now, human experience itself is a very, very, very diverse thing. And this is where the word matrix comes in. Because like the Matrix, human experience is a dream. It is as broad and as diverse as all of the movies you've ever seen and all of the movies you've never seen. It's a magical thing that we have that we call experience. But everyone translates experience in their own way. And the tools that we use to translate experience are generally language. And language comes from culture. And culture is just people coming together that begin to have a harmonic to their way of thinking, their way of sharing ideas. So what we're going to be talking about today is how people's ideas, the root ideas that have sort of steered the flow of life on this planet, all have a basic harmonic structure that connects them together. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that the whole universe is a harmonic structure. Everything that we experience is a harmonic structure. From the smallest atoms to the entire galaxy to the whole universe, everything that we experience is within a union with everything else. We know this intuitively, we experience this because we look at a nautilus shell, or any shell we pick up on the beach, and we see a spiral. But what's interesting is then we're walking in the woods and we see a little fiddlehead of a fern. It's the same spiral. And then we're studying the body architecture in art class and we realize that our finger to our finger to our finger to our wrist to our arm to our whole arm is actually that same spiral. It's just extended and a little bit more blocky, right? And we see patterns in the universe all over the place. We see fractals everywhere, right? A simple formula for how things get bigger and things get smaller. And hidden inside those fractals, hidden inside of that patterning, is the harmonic that we're talking about, is the unification, is the key to everything. So how did this get started for me? Well, first of all, I began to really think about, the universe, its size, its scale, its shape, the dimensions of really how big everything is. And I mean, things are really freaking big out there. And things are really, 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 really small, okay? And some of what we're going to be talking about, the beginning level of what we're talking about is like the Planck scale. The Planck scale is so small, it's like, it's basically the smallest possible size that we can conceive of in space-time. And being that smallest possible measurable size that we can do, is sort of the root of all measurement, so to speak, it forms a nice sort of fundamental basis for looking at, okay, well, if the fabric of space-time was actually a fabric, let's say it was a weave of threads moving through the universe, if it's actually a fabric, the Planck scale is the size of the threads. That's actually the threads of the fabric of space-time. And then you get up to the atomic nucleus, and that's where we're going to start talking about things where most of us have an idea about stuff. But look at the size difference here. 10 to the negative 35 meters is Planck scale, and 10 to the negative 14 meters is atomic nucleus scale. That's a difference of like negative 21 meters, right? Okay, just to give you an idea, that's a 10 with 35 zeros in front of it before the decimal point. Okay, that's 0.35 zeros to a 1 meter. And that's 0.14 zeros, 1 meters at the atomic nucleus scale. And now, if you look at the entire size of the universe to our human body at 1 meter, right, is 10 to the 26th to 1.7 meters on average, right? So the human body to the entire size of the universe is not that much different in scale between the Planck scale and an atomic nucleus, okay? That'll give you just a little bit of an idea of how big these differences are that we're talking about. But even with them being so big, so huge, they have the same exact patterns. The same exact patterns on the tiniest scales all the way up to the biggest scales. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And so there's a guy, his name is Nassim Haramein. Some of you may be familiar with his work. He sort of presented the idea that maybe there's actually not only a pattern that's connecting these smallest possible scales up to the biggest possible scales. Maybe there's more than just that, that huge range, but maybe if you start to look at the energy ratio to the size of each one of these things, maybe energy to size will show a pattern. And what he found was that pattern lined up basically the Planck scale all the way up through the atomic nucleus, all the way up through basically the microtubules in the brain, all the way up to galactic scales, and all the way up to the size of the universe. But he found that the only way you could fit the atomic nucleus on here, the only way that fit on the line, which is the little A up there, I forgot my laser. The only way it fits on the line is if you calculate the atomic nucleus of every atom to have a black hole inside of it. Right? That's kind of interesting. A black hole inside of atoms? What? Every atom has a black hole in it? Okay, that seems kind of crazy. Like, what we know of black holes is they're just big, massive things in space, and they're so gravitationally strong they can suck planets and stars into them and bend light, right? And if you go in, who knows? You might pop out on the other side of the universe, or you might just get crushed into a singularity, right? Completely obliterated into nothing. Right? So how could the center of every atom be a black hole? Well, it turns out that if you took a black hole that is itty bitty, I'm saying really, really small, and you stuck it inside of the nucleus of an atom, what you get, force-wise, is exactly equal to the force that we created back in the early 1900s that we call the strong force. We had no idea how an atom holds itself together, right? How do protons and neutrons stick together? How do they pull electrons in? There's no reason for that. They can't just be the positive and negative charges isn't enough in their size. And the protons and neutrons are literally glued together, stuck together, and we have no idea how they're holding in place. So we created this force, we called it the strong force, because physicists are really creative, and that strong force is intended to basically describe how an atom holds itself together. But We have no real proof of the strong force. We have no backing for it. And the strong force and the weak force, which was created later, and eventually the color force that we created for quarks and leptons and neutrinos, all of those things get completely wiped off the board if you simply recognize that in the center of every atom, there could be a tiny, itty-bitty little black hole. And then all of a sudden, all of physics gets unified. All of the big questions, all the quantum problems, all the huge issues with physics that we've had suddenly, completely get wiped out with this one idea. It's a powerful idea. He won for the best paper at a physics conference. It's actually a computing systems conference, but he won for the best paper in physics on this talk right here. And then this year he went and did a talk that actually would prove, and he used equations, and he proved definitively that every single proton has 10 to the 40th wormholes coming off of it, connecting every proton to 10 to the 40th other protons in the universe. And not only that, he could take a single proton, and just from the information on one proton, he was able to use calculations to calculate the exact size of the universe, the exact energy level of the universe. He could calculate to any level how many galaxies, how much basic matter, mass, all of that from a single proton. And then he took that whole information about the whole size of the universe, and then he basically just divided off all the wormholes. Let's say you take away all the wormholes, take away all the connections. Imagine the universe is completely devoid of connection altogether. And what did he get? The exact weight of the standard model proton. In other words, the old school proton, the one that we think is separated, the one that we imagine isn't connected to anything, that's what you have if you ignore those other calculations. But all you got to do, as soon as you add in the connections, boom, it plugs in, everything fits, the entire universe is shown to be completely interconnected, and you can get perfect calculations that any high school student can do on the entire force of relativity, the entire relativity of the universe itself. So Nassim is blowing some minds open with this stuff, and back in the day, before I met Nassim, I came across this paper on spin and scaling and all of this stuff, and I was like, holy shit. This is so connected to everything that I'm experiencing. This is so connected to this whole vision I've been having. And the vision that I was having started with a single eye. And in that eye, I saw connection to a body, to a head. And then I zoomed out and I saw that head connected to a whole body, connected to organs, connected to arms and legs, and then that whole body standing on a field. And there was wind blowing. And I saw that whole field zooming out, and the field was surrounded by forests and connected to the forests. And there was wind and energy and plants and bugs connecting and communicating between this person and all this land around him. And then it went further, and I saw how the mountains and the water cycles and the rivers and the oceans were all part of a cyclic connection that person was experiencing right then. The evaporating water in the ocean had as much to do with the feeling on that person's skin as the ground beneath his feet. And then I saw that the entire planet was like an organism, flowing with life and water and light and earth and shaking and moving like bones and blood. And then I saw that the whole earth was part of a solar system. And around the earth was the moon, and the earth and the moon dance in this waveform. It's not just no. As the moon moves, it causes the earth to undulate as it travels, and they create a spiraling energy together. The earth is actually going like this, closer and further away from the sun. And the moon is going in and out too, pulsing and flowing. And then I saw that out of time, like a ring, and saw every planet was like a ring around the sun, a ring of energy with different amounts of moons. that created different complexities in how they spiraled and flowed. And then I saw the sun and all those planets cruising through the galaxy like this huge spiraling wave vortex rolling around the core. And then I saw all the other spiral branches. And then I saw other galaxies. And all the galaxies had different shapes and structures and flows, but all pulsed and sent energy to each other across these huge, vast distances of space that we see as light, that we experience as color, that we actually affect ourselves as galactic and cosmic rays. We're receiving communications from galaxies all over the universe right now. Fantastic. And then I saw that all these galaxies were webbed together into galactic networks, and then those galactic networks got bigger and bigger, clusters, until I began to see more and more and more like the entire universe, blinding light of just like so much light and information and exchange and magic. And that whole universe cusped in my vision, and I saw that it was just part of this huge energetic wave, like this huge, massive, spiraling energy wave that was weaving into the toroidal forms and traveling through this sacred geometry gridwork matrix, like something out of an acid trip, or something that you saw on mushrooms one time, or on an ayahuasca experience, or just meditated and your mind was blown open and you saw this gridwork running through everything, right? And I saw that gridwork. And then I realized that gridwork, I saw that it was forming shapes and structures. And the shapes and structures that I saw that gridwork forming were spheres packed together and vibrating. Spheres that had light flowing around them, right? In these waveforms and dynamics that looked like a planet with moons, but it was light traveling, and they were spinning in these cables connected together. And I realized that what I was seeing was atoms connecting together into molecular chains and structures. And I saw those molecules connecting together in spirals and forming DNA. And then I saw that that DNA was wrapping, as it spun, around these huge proteins like this, just like an entire solar system, and the galaxies weave, and was forming chromosomes and gene structures. And then the chromosomes zoomed out, and I saw that they were inside a nucleus of a cell, like a big sphere, a universe, unifying all the different chromosomes, all their different information. And then I saw outside of that, that was connected to all these organelles in a bigger universe, the whole cell. And then I saw cells and cells and cells forming tissues and tissues and tissues, and then I saw the eye again. And they all made up that eye. And I had that vision in about 0.01 seconds when I was about 15. And I was sitting and watching my friends play Tekken on their computer game. And Jimmy Buffett was on the radio. They were playing a Jimmy Buffett CD. And I don't think it was Cheeseburger in Paradise, but it was something like that song. You know, Cheeseburger in Paradise. And I was listening, I was watching, and I just spaced out, and then all of a sudden, it was like, boom! You know? And I mean, the whole thing was so detailed, it was so dense that it just like completely took me in. It completely swallowed me whole, you know? And I came out of it, and my friends are still in the same round, fighting, you know? The song is the same song, like not even later in the verse. It was like the same point. I look over at my friends, I'm like, good God, like, you know, like, and they're just totally oblivious. And I realized it was for me, you know? It was for me to figure out. It was for me to deal with. And it started happening to me other times, too. And anytime I tried to remember it, it would just, and I'd see the eye and the whole thing. It's like, man, I got some really, really good drugs already in my brain, you know? I got some serious, like, DMT in there or something, you know? Like, life and death can happen with Jimmy Buffett, you know? So anyway, I began to explore that and explore the information contained inside of that, and that's what gave me this presentation. So I'm going to take you on a journey through experience and dimensions. And I'm going to show you how every layer of the universe is completely harmonically interconnected with our experience itself. So one of the things we're going to talk about here is how experience is dimensional. And what that means is that, like a point that doesn't change, that becomes a line as it starts to change and move through time, and then becomes a plane when it witnesses itself traveling on that line, that's us. That's what we do. Our physical body, boom, like a point, doesn't change. Emotions change in time. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm joyous, I'm angry, and we have to change and move through the emotions in order to feel, in order to actually experience energy moving, emotion. And our minds are like a plane. We see ourselves here, we see ourselves there. We watch ourselves go through the emotions, we think about the emotional things, we come to understand them through the perspective that that gives us. And then we kind of unify those things, and we experience ourselves as one thing. I am physical, emotional, mental being, and then I start to realize that there's more than just me. And that's some of what we're going to talk about as well. So let's talk about the point a little bit. A point could be a state, a position. A point is. It just is. It doesn't have to change. It doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to be interesting. It can just be. And that's kind of like most physical things that we experience. Like the ground. Ground doesn't got to move, doesn't have to change, doesn't have to be anything or become anything. It's just the ground, and it's solid, and it's there. A rock is a rock is a rock. Water is a water is water. Doesn't have to change, doesn't have to do anything different for us to experience its solidity. Our body, yeah, it's there. It's always been there. Our whole time of experiencing it, it's there. Yes, it changes, but the physical raw experience of touch, of taste, of hearing, of smells, of sights, all of those things, it's in the moment. It's right now. You only get the senses that you have at this moment. With our minds, we can extend beyond that. But the point is the root of our physical experience. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, there we go. An atomic nucleus. All right, talked a little bit about that. Well, the atomic nucleus contains the protons and the neutrons, which make up mass. And mass is physical experience. I know this is hard ground because it's heavy mass. It's got a lot of weight to it. It's solid. Water has less mass. I can move my hand right through it. Air has very little mass. It doesn't even feel like anything, right? But the heavier the mass, the more solid something is, the more we experience it as a physical thing that we're experiencing. Sometimes when the wind has a lot of mass because it's blowing really intensely, it has a lot of pressure, we're like, whoa, right? The density of it, we're like, this wind is heavy, you know? Like, it feels physical to us. But when the wind isn't moving at all, it's like, oh, I have to move through this wind to even know it's there, right? Otherwise, it's not even there. That's the mass. And the mass is in the nucleus of every atom, just like a point. In our bodies, we have a cell nucleus. Each cell nucleus contains all the information for our entire bodies. Every single nucleus of every single cell, inside of it, it has a bunch of little chromosomes and DNA, and in there is all the information you need for your entire physical body. All of this, your whole experience, packed in that point, right there. And then what about the body? The body is a nucleus as well, right? This is the nucleus of our physical experience. here I am. This is my physical experience. Ta-da, there it is. Yep, yep, yep. This is it. This is what I have. This is my physical experience. It's the template. It's got all of the data that we need to have our whole physical lives. All right, pretty obvious stuff. Now the Earth. Well, the Earth is our macrocosmic physical experience. She's got our wind, she's got our trees, she's got our waves, she's got our earth, she's got the fire, air, earth, water. She's got the whole experience, and she shapes all of our external physical senses. Because of how the Earth has evolved, we have evolved to experience it physically, right? It's the gifts that the Earth has given us that bring us each of our external physical senses. So, great, that's all easy enough. That's all the physical stuff. Boom, no problem, right? Next level. What happens when you start changing in time? What happens when you start moving through time? Well, as we talked about before, what moves through time and what changes is energy. Energy is in motion all the time, right? And that is emotion. That is what emotion is. That's what it's all about, right? Emotional change. So what does emotion have to do with anything? Well, an atom has electrons around it. Well, those electrons happened to have electromagnetic vibration. And that electromagnetic vibration gives us the color that we see everywhere. Did you know that? The vibration of electrons around the atoms in the flowers right there give us the idea that those flowers are red or pink or fuchsia, or the sign is blue, or the light is pink, or that's yellow, or orange, really, more like it. And we experience that color. We experience that with our eyes because the electrons around the nucleus of that atom are vibrating in such a way that light is reflecting off of it a certain way. And when those electrons get excited enough, they release light of their own. They actually jump and they release this ripple through the fabric of space-time, which is a photon. And that photon is actually what's hitting me right now from those lights over there. They're all heated up and super excited, and so they're just like, blah, 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 just like shooting photons at me, right? Pretty awesome. Well, think about color, right? For all this time, across all of history, all the authors, all the writers, all the poets, what do they use to describe emotions? Colors. All the time. He's blue, he's green with envy, he's red with anger, right? Energy is described in color. Color describes energy, right? And so color also describes emotion and defines our emotions in many ways. So then we have our cells in our bodies. Our cells around the nucleus of every cell have a bunch of organelles. And guess what those organelles do? The organelles interpret chemical signals in our body, right? They take some of those chemical signals and it pumps them up and it makes them contract and flow and expand. It takes other of those chemical signals and causes the cell to go, takes other of those chemical signals and the cell decides to replicate, right? And all of those things that happen in our cells because of the chemicals, and guess what chemicals are? They're just groups of atoms working together like a molecule that have a certain charge, a certain electromagnetic charge. This is where the electrons around each atom are communicating to the cells. They're communicating to the cells through that membrane and through each organelle, which serves a different purpose and actually is the experience in our bodies of emotional feelings. You know that feeling you get in your gut, right? You have that, or the joy that around your stomach? Those are your cells. Your cells are actually interpreting chemicals and putting off a charge, receiving and putting off a charge, and you're experiencing an emotion. Cool. Our bodies. Our bodies have energy around us. That energy vibrates. The vibration of the energy around our bodies, is expressed, and we feel it. Everybody here knows what vibes are, right? Heard you get the vibe when you walk in the room. Well, all that is that's field around your body, and it's vibrating. You walk into a room, and you can feel the freaking vibrations in there. You can take pictures of people's electromagnetic fields. The heartbeat itself puts off a vibrational wave that can be read up to 50 feet away. That's a big electromagnetic field. And so we're immersed in each other's emotions as well, just by what we're feeling. Our body is an electrical field. There's a great book on this called The Body Electric. Highly, highly recommended. So then the moon is also part of our emotional experience, right? The moon, as it goes through its cycles of being full and being new, it changes the amount of electromagnetic energy that's shining down onto the earth. And as that change happens, as there's a bigger wave of electromagnetic energy or a smaller one, as the moon goes around, guess what? Dogs freak out when the energy's up there, right? It's like, the moonlight's coming down and they're like, the coyotes are freaking out, the wolves, women are bleeding. It's like there's just stuff happening in our bodies, right? Our bodies are moved by the moon, right? Men and women both experience this very, very deeply. And the thing is, most of us are not even conscious of it. Most people do not even know how strong that effect is. But if you start keeping like a moon journal and just keep track of a little bit of what you experience in a moon cycle, just write down what happened today, you will see. Every person has strong emotional changes that occur in cycle with the changing patterns of the moon. So that's the emotional layer, right? But then what about our minds? Our minds are essential. Well, mind is like a plane. It's like space, right? Mind is about perspective. So as we gain perspective on our change through time, on our lines as we move through time, or our physical bodies, suddenly now we get to see something new. We experience something else, and that something else is not just feeling an emotion traveling through space. It's not just being in your body and having a physical sense of something. It's actually witnessing your physical senses. It's witnessing the changes that you go through in time. And so the mind creates shapes inside of space. It's not just about vibration. It's about form. It's about dimensions. It's about geometries. Well, on the microcosmic level, geometries make up molecules. Atoms come together in different shapes and structures. And those different molecular structures actually are the basis for all our conscious conceptual differences. In other words, the glass of this vase is hard, right? The floor, similarly, is also hard. The wall is also hard. They all have mass. They all are solid things, right? But what makes them different? Well, the molecular structure of that glass allows it to be transparent so that light shines through it, and it gives it a very smooth texture on its surface. That is what makes me know that's glass. And I can only tell that by looking at it, by experiencing it in that way. And the ground, I know, there's paint on it because I can see the structure of the actual texture that's in there that's making paint on top of, I'm guessing, concrete, right? And I could have a similar experience with the wall. And I only know that these things are different because their structure is different, right? Water and wine, what's the difference? Well, we can actually taste with our minds. We can taste the molecular structural differences, and we can see them in the color, right? So molecules and the structure of molecules gives us different mental experiences. Tissues, in the same way, have different structures, and those different structures allow us to process information differently. we have a certain type of structure that our brain is made out of. Now, that brain structure processes mental information. The different structures inside our body, our muscles are meant to do other things. Our skin is meant to be a membrane in other ways. Our digestive tissues break things down and change things. And all of those things happen because of the structure of the tissues, right? And every tissue structure is also directly oriented to its neurological function. In other words, our conscious mental thinking of how we are being, right? How is our body doing? Well, it feels this way, it is this way, it is this way, you know? And it's actually the structure of our bodies and the structure of our tissues that give us those mental conceptual differences. The mind is a structure itself. Around our bodies, we have this energy field, and then we have actually a mental structural field that forms around us. You want to know what it looks like? Go look in your room. Your room is a map of your mental structure. How you put things, what's there, what's special to you, what's reserved, what do you not care about, what's on the floor, what's not being dealt with yet, right? The pile of papers in the corner, you know, how clean is the car? All the things outside of you are reflections of what's going on inside of your own mental structure, right? So the mind's structure is actually showing up in what you're manifesting in the world around you. Thought is a bunch of forms. And the more you learn the forms of your own thought, the more you begin to align the geometries of your thinking. The more you start to change how you fit ideas together. The more you begin to recognize that every person's perspective, every person's perception actually just comes from the collection of language or forms and structures and geometries that build up the way that they think. And so you suddenly realize that nobody's wrong. Nobody's ever been wrong about anything. They've actually only been right based on the structure of perspective that they've been given, the structure of their own thinking. And so if you want to address the big world problems, if you want to address Occupy Wall Street, if you want to address the major issues on this planet, we have to look at the root structures of why people have been thinking the way they have been thinking. And change that, and then you begin to see your whole room change. We change it as a collective, we see the whole planet change, right? So, what's up next, right? The whole solar system is a structure. The whole solar system aligns itself into different geometries, different planets in different spots, and based on the geometry of all the planets in the solar system, their gravitational positioning, their light reflection, all of that has as much impact on us on Earth as the moon does to the Earth. And the moon is freaking pulling the oceans. It's pretty obvious. But, I mean, Jupiter is freaking big. These are big planets, and they have big light, and they have lots of moons, and all of them are like their own atoms in a molecular structure, right? Each planet in the solar system has its own moons, forming its own electromagnetic waveform as it travels around the sun, reflecting on the Earth in a certain way, and it affects your consciousness. There's an entire massively well-known study about this. It's called astrology. And all astrology is a study of where the positions are of these giant bodies relative to the Earth and to the background electromagnetic energy that's coming in from the stars, right, and other galaxies and things like that. And based on where it's at, you can kind of tell there's patterns that we have in our experience. And it doesn't even matter if you believe that those planets can affect you with their light, which they can. I'm being very affected by all these lights right now. But it doesn't even matter if you believe that, or if you believe that their gravity has an effect on this planet, which it does. It doesn't matter at all. Because all that matters is that you recognize that the human mind has structures and cycles to it. We go through cycles in our thinking. And if you've ever noticed yourself do the same thing again that you did before, and you're like, I should have remembered that I shouldn't have done that because last time when I did it, this happened. Well, you did it again because it's habit, because it's a cycle, because it's a process in your mind. And those little cycles of habits and things you do every day, they're also huge. They also happen through whole months and seasons and years, and with huge cycles like the Saturn return cycle, which I happen to be right in the middle of, which is super fun, it's 28, 29-year cycle, So, I'm experiencing some stuff I haven't experienced since I was pushed out of my mother's yoni and birthed into the physical flesh of my own body on this planet. That's big. It's a lot of pressure in coming out and having to be an individual, totally responsible for yourself, breathing your own air, right? Being your own being independently, completely, right? And there's a lot in us that wants that, and wants to experience that. Well, that's a big cycle, So the solar system is part of structure, right? The mind is a structure. Geometry is a structure. Everything that happens in our mental layer of our beings is based on forms and structures and geometries. And every layer of the universe on that level reflects it. So what happens next? Well, a point and a line and a plane eventually become a sphere. But a sphere is pretty much just a big point, right? It's just a big circle instead of a little small circle, right? It's just a boundary that we're putting around some nebulous amount of space. We don't know how much it is. But a sphere is basically a recognition simply of omnidirectional awareness. It is, there's a point there, and then from that point, some amount of change has happened. Some amount of time and space has occurred, right? And then there's some amount of perspective that you've gotten on how much time and space has occurred. And then from that perspective, you hold a certain amount of spherical awareness or experience of space. And this is the level where you realize that there's actually an event horizon to your experience. There's a level where your space-time, my space-time, ends and yours begins. There's some place where my mind is not always your mind. There's an edge to me. That's all the sphere is. That's all the fourth dimension is it's the recognition that as I move through time and you move through time, our different space-time vehicles have different possible trajectories. We can experience different stuff. Whoa. So I'm not alone. I am one, but I'm not just one. But I'll maybe get back to being one in a minute. We'll see. Well, DNA does the same thing. Every molecule is individual, right? Every molecule gets to be its own molecule. Every atom gets to be its own atom. Every proton gets to be its own proton, right? Well, DNA is something kind of special because DNA unifies molecules for a greater purpose. It takes simple energy, simple structures, like amino acids, right, that are basically, chemical and molecular structures, and it puts together a bunch of random amino acids and chemical structures, and all of a sudden, you start getting a chain, a form, where those structures come together and suddenly are able to contain information, a density of information, a lot of information, right? In fact, can contain all the information necessary to experience everything that you're experiencing. Your entire bodies, all of your ancestry, the entire chain of evolution from the beginning all the way till now is recorded in your DNA. And in fact, 99.9% of that is not what makes you up as an individual. 99.9% of that information encoding is actually the record of your ancestral bloodline, soul line, whatever you want to call it, all the way through time, all the way back to the first DNA that ever was, that you're connected to, right? And that 0.01% or 0.1% or whatever, maybe less, maybe a little more, that little bit that makes up you as who you are is really special. It's really amazing because that's actually how you use that other 99%. That's actually how you deal with it, how you adapt with it, how you live and how you experience with it. DNA is an incredible information storage device, right? It's connecting time and space. It's unifying molecules for a purpose. Well, our bodies also have systems that unify things. Organs inside our bodies bring together all the different tissues of our skin that makes up our stomach, that makes up our intestines, makes up the different things that we're experiencing, and our organs bring all those tissues and structures together to serve a unified purpose as a whole, to each have their own event horizon that makes them different from the other organs in the body. The heart pumps blood. Right? The lungs breathe oxygen. The stomach digests food. The brain thinks, right? I mean, these, all the tissues that make them up, there's tons of different tissues. There's muscular tissues. There's all these different things, and all of which can have multiple purposes. You can use the same molecules that are in a heart, to make a freaking cup, right? But it's the way that they're all put together. It's the unification that they all come together that makes it an individual thing. It's that 0.1% of the DNA that makes it an individual thing, that gives it that individual purpose. And it's the most powerful part, right? And it turns out that there's patterns in these things. And we begin to see the pattern as we begin to explore that the same experience is happening right here with our bodies. I have an event horizon of my being, which makes me me. And you have an event horizon of your being, which makes you you. And guess what? We get to interact. And by our interactions, we get to learn. We get to unify. We get to be one. We get to be separate. We get to have all of these amazing experiences. I get to have my purpose, and you get to have your purpose. And they can be different. That's amazing, right? Well, guess what? Whole galaxies, right? All the solar systems, all those stars, all of those things, they all are swirling together into something that we call a singularity, right? A giant black hole that is basically unifying every star in the galaxy into a single organism and pulling them all together, trying to unify them into actual oneness, right? This is the action of galaxies. I'm going to make all of you one, assimilate all of you into my oneness and unity, But it's freaking awesome. It's like a body. It's like a giant one being, pulling together billions of stars into oneness. And guess what? It has a nice pattern to it, doesn't it? Galaxies, spiral galaxies in particular, which happen to be galaxies that already interacted with another galaxy, they merged with another galaxy, and then they make that spiral. And that spiral right there happens to be at the phi ratio. Right? Now, the phi ratio, as we talked about in the beginning of the talk, and I mentioned the shells that form that shape and the fiddlesticks growing on the ferns, well, the phi ratio just happens to be a ratio that almost every living system in existence follows in order to build its body harmonically, in order to build its life harmonically, right? And it turns out that that same ratio happens to be the width of your DNA to 1 turn of your DNA. 1.618, blah, 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 on and on and on, right? So 1 turn of your DNA to the width of your DNA is the same exact ratio that makes up that spiral in that galaxy. And it turns out also that there's a gentleman named Dan Winter. He started a group called Institute of Heart Math, as well as many other studies, amazing individual. And he discovered that if you measure the heartbeat's wave, that actually if you measure the wave of the wave, in other words, the peaks and the troughs of how it goes, boom, boom, right? That there's a ratio between the peaks, the troughs, and the next peak, right? And what he found was that people, different states of emotion, actually had different ratios. And people in states of, anger would have really sharp drop-offs. People in states of real sadness have long ratios drawn out. But people that were in a self-described state of compassion or feeling love for someone, their heartbeat's wave actually got closer and closer to guess what ratio? The phi ratio. And he had monks come in, and they would measure the monks' waves of their hearts, and the monks would go into these deep meditations, and bam, they would hit the phi ratio like dead on. Like boom. And what he began to study was that pine cones, seeds, plants, our bodies, all of these things are built for a purpose, and that purpose, one of those purposes, is for compression. Compression is taking lots of information, lots of energy, and compressing it down into an integrated, unified being, right? And what he found was that that ratio is the perfect ratio for compression. And in fact, you can compress infinite amount of energy, infinite amount of data into any space if you're using that ratio. What does that mean? It means if you're in a state of love, you can pretty much draw in anything you can imagine into your life, into your experience, into your moment now. It also means that just like this galaxy, yes, the center of that galaxy, that singularity can actually take all those stars and make them one. It can do it. It will do it. You wait long enough, and it will. Our DNA can integrate all the information through all of time that it's ever recorded, and we can experience that information now. Now, all these things seem pretty far out, big, like metaphysical leaps, but if we take simple principles like compression and the phi ratio and its power, people like Dan Winter took those ideas and went really far with them and showed that you can actually do a heck of a lot of amazing things with the phi ratio. Now, almost every airline turbine, every boat turbine, all the really good engines that run, especially with fluid dynamics of energy, they all use the phi ratio because there's no other ratio that works to capture that energy the same way. It just doesn't work. And obviously, the universe knows this because every plant is growing like this, right? So what's next? Okay, we got galaxies now related to DNA. We got in our physical bodies, atomic nucleus, cell nucleus, coming up to the body itself, the whole body, into the earth as our physical experience. In our emotional experience, we have, the whole of the atom, and then the whole of the cell, and then the whole of our bodies with our emotional fields, and then the moon and the earth as an emotional body. In our sun, our mind, right? We experience something that is molecules on a small scale, that is tissues on a larger scale, that is actually the structure of our minds outside of us and how we're creating with our minds around us on the bio or metacosmic level. And then beyond that, the entire solar system is a reflection of our minds. And then what about our interpersonal experience, right? The beginning of DNA, where molecules come together and form strands of DNA, and that's very, very similar to the processes that are going on, on a basic level inside our organs, and how our organs are unifying information, connecting us together, unifying our purpose. And the same thing is happening all the way up to a galactic level in our relationships with each other, right? So let's look at the next layer up. Now it starts to get even more interesting. Not only is all the things in the last level, phi ratio, having to do with unification and purpose, but at this level, now we're getting pretty complex. Now we're talking about whole beings exchanging information, right? So in the last level, we looked at how all the information unifies into oneness. And now we're going to look at how that unification of information, what's its purpose? Why? Well, it does it so that it can communicate, so that it can evolve, so that it can be relative to something else, like a whole being moving and changing relative to itself and relative to other things. Dimensionally, we come to this level, we call the torus, or like fifth dimensional, right? You're not just dealing with the 4D anymore, you're now moving, right? Or it's 4D traditionally using standard dimensional physics, and it's like the fifth layer in what we've been talking about, fifth dimensional consciousness-wise, if you want to get into New Age terminology. And so what's happening on this level? Well, DNA is coming together and it's forming chromosomes. And chromosomes have a very simple act that they do. They hold all that DNA, they bring it all in, where it's making proteins, shaping that DNA, connecting that DNA together, and guess what? Then the DNA and the chromosomes, they split apart. And they split apart so that the entire cell can divide, and then those chromosomes remake their other half. So the whole purpose of a chromosome is to communicate all of your information from one cell to another. It takes everything you are, and it communicates it into a new cell. Takes all that, copies it, communicates it into a new cell. Takes all that, copies it, communicates it into a new cell. So it's sharing information through communication, right? On the next level up, organ systems do the same thing. They take all the organs, all of them that are doing their own individual processes, and now they're actually communicating them to each other. So your heart's communicating to your whole body through the veins. Your brain's communicating to your whole body through your neurological networks. Your stomach is communicating with your intestines, your whole digestive system, lymphatic system, all the parts, your skeletal system is constantly in communication with the rest of your body and gravity to make you stand up or sit or whatever, right? It's coordinating all those processes and communicating them to each other, right? Well, culture and language is our way of there not just being me and you, but now there's me and you and you and you and you and you and you and you, right? There's all of us, and we collectively, through our communication, we form ideas and language and processes for how to then share the information again. So I tell you one thing, and then you take it in, and you go home, and you're like, dude, he was talking about something crazy, I don't even know. He was like showing some stuff. He was saying how the whole universe is like all connected. He was making my brain hurt, He was like, you take the ideas and you say, well, but then I realized he was like, oh yeah, he was talking about chromosomes and how chromosomes communicate information just like cultures. And I was just thinking about that, like, damn, that's pretty crazy. Like, and that's like organ systems in my body. Whoa, that's interesting. It's interesting that there is a similar process going on each one of these levels. And it's very interesting that our whole collective process of communication is based on that idea, that there is a similarity going on through how we're experiencing things. So that I can be like, hey man, today at work, I totally got fired. And you're like, oh, dude, I've totally had that experience before, right? And you both are like, whoa, we just shared an experience. Like, all right, let's have a smoke together. Let's talk it out. You want to go out to eat or something, man? Let me take you out. Like, let's chill, right? And that's something that happens in every layer of our experience. We take the things that are similar between us, and we align them, and we put them into a specific energy, a specific spot. This is this emotion, this style. It has this word for it. And that word is, hell yeah, Or that word is, or that word is like, boom shakalaka, right? Or that word is awesome, or that word is wicked, or that word is ouch, right? Or that word is joy, or that word is love, right? Each word contains inside of it, each piece of our language is like a gene inside of a chromosome, right? And as we teach our kids, we're taking our whole chromosomes of all the genes, all the language structures that we've put together, and we're splitting them off of us, and we're giving them to our kids. And guess what? Actually, we're just awakening all the genes that we already put in our kids, right? Because we gave it to them already. They already have all our genes. But through language and through communication, we activate those genes. And those genes are an awareness structure. And there are ways for us to turn on and off our genes. Anybody here heard of theta healing? It's a whole healing system based on being able to change your DNA and your genes by changing your consciousness and your belief systems, right? Sounds really woo-woo new agey, right? Well, guess what? I've known people who changed their hair color by changing their belief about their hair color. I've seen someone theta gas out of their car so they couldn't drive home because they didn't want to leave, and it was a joke until they actually did it, and the car had no gas in it, and they couldn't start the car. Until the morning after, when they did want to leave, and we thought we'd reverse it. And so we theta gas back into the car. He started the car. It was driving fine. He drove it to the gas station and filled it up. But no matter what we did the night before, we could not start that freaking car because the gas was completely gone and it was empty. You can bring things into this world through your belief systems. This is the idea of creative consciousness. And these are little bits of things that a lot of people experience, but few people have the language and sometimes the kahunas, if you know what I mean, to actually talk about, right? But it's become a mass culture phenomenon now, with movies like The Secret, What the Bleep Do We Know, Thrive, which is coming out soon. These are all about the idea that we're creating all of this stuff that we're experiencing based on how we think and based on the language that we use. And there's tons of incredible research out there about how people's language shapes the entire structures of what they're experiencing in their lives. So if you want to experience more abundance, more joy, more love, more good stuff in your life, think about the words that you're using. How are you communicating to the world around you? Because what you're communicating, like as they say in Christianity, God is the Word and the Word was God, right? First came the Word. Well, your word comes first. What you speak is speaking into existence. It's the sound. It's resonating everything. It's communicating with everything, okay? Galaxy clusters are great models for how everything communicates with everything else. Because you know what? They're really, really, really far away, right? Each galaxy from every other galaxy is a long freaking way, right? Talking about thousands and thousands of millions of light years. We're talking billions of light years sometimes, to get between galaxies. That's a long way, right? That means if you're traveling almost light speed, right, you got to go for a billion years to get to another galaxy, right? They're huge. These are huge structures that we're talking about, and yet right now you're getting You're getting right now information from galaxies halfway across the universe. Right now, into your skin, into your body, bam, they are hitting you. They are affecting you right this moment, because there's continuous cosmic streams of energy and information traveling through the universe. And so you are inexplicably tied to that. And guess what? If every proton in your body has 10 to the 40th wormholes connected to it, as Nassim would say, then you're not only experiencing the waves from those galaxies, you're actually physically tied by wormholes, or Einstein-Rosen bridges is another term, or portals to the matter in those galaxies. You're actually getting to experience what's inside those galaxies right now. Because it turns out that the calculation is that there's about 10 to the 80th actual different protons in the universe. There's 10 to the 80th in the universe, and you're connected to 10 to the 40th, then you've got about half the protons in the universe connected to your body. What's happening to the other half? Well, that's why you need relationships. That's why you can't do everything yourself. You need two people to cover all the protons in the entire universe. So galaxies communicate information to each other between galaxies, galaxy clusters. So then what happens next? Well, now we're talking about going 5D, you know, in traditional geometric physics, and we're talking about the 6th level here in the consciousness. And the 6th level is the point where the sphere is not just going through a cyclical orbit, you know, changing in time, but now that orbit is seen outside of time as already having completed itself, and that whole structure is forming a wormhole. And this is the point when you realize that everything you've ever communicated through all of time, and everything that's ever been communicated to you through all of time, is actually one whole thing that you can look at. There's the whole of you, right? One of the physicists like to describe it as a snake traveling through time, right? You're born, you come out of one cell, you know, you're like more cells and more cells, and then, you know, you're birthed, and then you're a little kid, and you grow up, and you get bigger and bigger, you know, and you get older and older, you get slower and slower, and you get, you know, in my case, I'm like an old man doing Tai Chi. Then eventually you sit down, and you die, you know, or you're like, oh, and you die, or you're like, and you die, you know? And that whole thing, and then you die and you go out to ash. Right? So it's like a big snake if you look at it outside of time. You're this little thing, and you grow and morphize and get smaller, and that's you. Well, that's the wormhole of your life outside of time. But maybe the wormhole of your life outside of time actually goes through many of those. Maybe not, you know? Maybe if you looked at your energy, what about all the wormholes of all the energy from all the food that you ate? Can you imagine a visual of like every fruit and every, you know, like imagine how connected to the entire planet you are based on all the food that you've eaten, all the water you've drank, where it came from. I mean, you're basically woven like a net into the entire planet. And that is exactly the idea, is understanding that you're already synchronized with the whole planet. Just like every chromosome in your body is all connected into a single unified nucleus of a cell, right? All the chromosomes come together, they make one nucleus, and that nucleus has all the information for your whole body. Wait a minute, this sounds really familiar. Didn't we start at this level? Yeah, we did. This is the point of return. This is where the nucleus of an atom makes it all the way up and becomes the nucleus of a cell, which is the whole of the physical experience, right, on the first level. But it's also the whole experience. It's the whole shebang. As above, so below. All the physical experience actually is all of the everything else experience. They're actually the same thing. This is a microcosmic model of everything that you experience. And the body, this is where the body comes in again. We went from the nucleus of that cell, and we went through a cell, through the tissues, through the organs, through the organ systems, and all of a sudden you get a whole body. And the whole body, just like it is the nucleus of your physical experience, but it's also your whole experience. It's a map of the entire universe. It's a fractal of the whole universe. It's a biocosmic fractal of existence. That's one way I like to look at it. In your hand, in the lines, in the pattern, in the shape, in the number, in the fives that you're made of. And all of these things, you are modeling all of existence. In your eyes, right? In the way that you're built. You're modeling the whole universe. Pretty freaking awesome. And the earth is what you're totally, completely interconnected to. This is the metacosmic expression of our experiences. So we go from our bodies, we have an energy field. The energy field takes on different forms with our minds. Our minds allow us to connect and to think and to have perspective with other people. Then with other people, we have relationships, and then we have cultures and whole experiences of language and tribes on Earth, and then all of those together, our whole relationships together, form the whole universe of the Earth, right? That's the whole cell, nucleus, so to speak, of our human experience. And then, of course, the whole universe. Because the Earth connects to the moon, connects to the solar system, connects to the whole galaxy. Could we get the heat turned down just a little bit on the mic? Connects to the whole galaxy, connects to galaxy clusters, and then from galaxy clusters, you get the entire universe, the entire macrocosmic embodiment of all that is, the beginning to the end. The first cell was the Big Bang, and the cell split, and it grew, and it changed, all the way through until you get galaxies, you get relationships, you get all of these different things in the entire journey of the universe that you have in your body. These are no different. They are the same thing. So what now? That was it, right? All right. That was the whole loop. The whole thing is all super connected. You go and then you're like back at the beginning again. It's like music. It's harmonic. You get up to the purple and then it starts to turn red again. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and then it's red and it starts going again. It's a cycle. It's the circle. It's the harmonics. This is how the universe is harmonic with itself. Each layer is interconnected, and as you get to a certain point, they begin to recycle. But there's something beyond just that circle, and the something just beyond that circle is the next level, and that's the level of mystery. That's the level of unity. That's the question mark that never gets answered. And the question is being itself. The question is implosion. The question is the point where all of those become unified again. Because they were unified, and then they separated out, and then they become unified again. And so when we look at this, we see that cells, cell nucleuses, become cells that have infinite variety. The nucleus of a cell can make any kind of cell you want. You could have infinite kinds of cells, right? The body has energy, and that energy didn't ever start or end. Energy is never created nor destroyed. Your energy body itself is eternal. It goes on forever. There are infinite possibilities of planets. You could have 1 billion different kinds of Earths and Earth-moon systems, and so many moons, or not so many moons, and a certain size, and certain patterns. There are no limits to how these can unfold. And in the same way, the universe, is that the end? Is that the biggest deal? No, we don't know. All we know is it's the one verse, the one word that we're experiencing, but it may be one of many. It might be part of a multiverse. It might be part of an infinityverse, right? We don't know. But it's infinite, it's eternal, and that's a huge gift. We have to always remember that there's always a mystery. There's always a point we don't understand. And the point we don't understand informs every other piece. Don't ever think you have the whole picture. I'm not here to tell you, this is the whole picture, this is how it is, go home, congratulations. In your notes, you now have the answer to everything. No, it's just a way of approaching things with better questions. Better questions for how things are interconnected, right? So, yeah, next. So let's talk a little bit about conscious experience. Let's talk a little bit about our movement through time here. And let me just give a check on time. Cool. All right. Conscious experience is such a beautiful thing. It's what we have. It's what we emerge from. It's how we journey. We have these physical experiences, these emotional experiences, these mental ideas, these interpersonal experiences, and then we have a collective level of experience where we're collectively physically experiencing each other through language. We're collectively experiencing each other through the ideas and the visions and the feelings that we have. The feeling I have and the feeling you have, which are then part of this soup of feeling that we are in together. And then we have this part of our experience, which is our collective mental experience, where I'm thinking thoughts and you're thinking thoughts, and sometimes those thoughts are the same thoughts. Sometimes they're the same exact thing. Out of the infinite possibilities of what you could be thinking and what I could be thinking, we happen to be thinking the same thing. It's incredible. It happens all the time. I wonder why. Well, because we're harmonically connected with each other through the entire universe, right? Well, there's models for this. Everything I just talked about, there have been models for, but never that have illustrated the exact way that each layer of the universe is actually interconnected. Well, one of those models is chakras. And chakras, or chakras, if you're Indian, chakras help us interface with the fabric of space-time by geometric resonance. Well, what most of us know is that chakras are something from, the Vedas or from this, one place. It's a Hindu tradition, and each chakra has lotus petals, and those lotus petals are basically, a certain number that reflect a certain type of experience or certain kinds of experiences. And, if there's less lotus petals, it opens easier and that sort of thing. And that from the experiences of your lotus petals, you begin to experience more of the universe, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that there are people like Barbara Ann Brennan, who was an astrophysicist from NASA, who basically quit her job studying the human energy body for NASA for space travel in order to to basically start a healing school, because she realized the entire human body was an energetic network, and that it had these things, chakras, like energy vortices moving into it, that you could measure the different layers of the human energy field, and that you could actually tell, if you learned how to look at it right, you could see when somebody was sick. And all illness was a constriction or an adhesion or a blockage in that flow of energy through the body. And so if illness is just energetic constriction, all you have to do is find the spot that's not flowing and open it up again. Get the energy moving again, right? And interestingly enough, that is such a great model for our human experience, right? If you leave food on the dish for so long and the energy doesn't move through it, it goes bad. It starts to stink. It gets ugly, right? Stuff is growing on it and eating it, and it's like composting and like, right? But all that's happened is it just didn't move for long enough. Energy didn't change. It didn't grow through it. It's part of its life cycle. Energy comes up, it grows, it blooms, it dies like a flower, right? And your body is the same way. But your body needs to keep energy moving through it, in it and out of it. What comes in has to go out. If you receive a lot of knowledge and you don't share it with people and you hold back your truth from being expressed, what you begin to experience is your throat gets all, sucks. You get throat sicknesses. If you stop paying attention and witnessing what other people are feeling and paying attention to how they're doing, caring about what they're dealing with, most people that do that get a sinus infection because right here gets all blocked up. They're not receiving someone else enough, right? If you stop connecting with people, you get heart disease. Your heart stops flowing. Your heart hurts a lot, right? Stop breathing. If you stop digesting the stuff that's going on in your life, you stop digesting the changes that are happening, you get sick to your stomach. But all you have to do is accept that you're not digesting stuff enough and start taking it in and saying, okay, I accept this. I'm willing to deal with it. I'm willing to take responsibility. Boom! Your stomach gets stronger. Your heart hurts. I love you. I'm willing to interact with you. I'm willing to connect with you. Boom! Your heart gets stronger. You know? Your throat. Just start sharing your truth. Start listening more. Be quiet so you can hear the changes. You can hear feedback. You can hear options. You can hear what people are dealing with. Receive the communication around you. Sometimes that's what's needed, right? So we can actually tune in to what's going on in our physical bodies, these different layers of our being, to understand the processes that we're not we're either moving energy through them or we're not. So talk a little bit about moving energy. And Barbara Ann Brennan, again, this was her drawing, her model of the human energy field. Incredible researcher, has a couple books. One of the books that's my favorite is called Light Emerging. If you've never seen it, highly, highly recommend checking it out. It's an incredible book about all of the different energetic processes that create health and the processes that create illness inside of humanity. It's amazing. And so, one of the big issues that comes up when we start thinking about the different processes that are going on in the body, and we start thinking about also just the ways that we're perceiving things, the differences in our perceptions, and we're starting to try to resolve our conscious experiences and find similarities and find synchronicities, find ways that our conscious experiences are similar and different and how we can relate to each other's experiences. One of the problems that comes up is the difference between expression and vibration, right? So an expression is basically anything that we could be describing. We have a word for it, love, right? We have an idea for it, boom. Here's a symbol for it, boom, you know? Those are expressions, right? That is an expression. In fact, all of these are expressions, right? But an expression isn't necessarily what the actual thing is that's vibrating, okay? It's not necessarily the actual energy, it's the way our minds have interpreted the energy that's flowing. Does that make sense? So, here's an example. This, in the middle, is maybe the way that energy might actually be flowing. It looks like a flower, doesn't it? Well, energy in the universe flows like this. These are phi ratio spirals, and they're interconnecting in a 5-pointed star. And this is exactly how certain flowers actually bloom and move, right? But we might symbolize that like this, because there's petals coming off of it, right? Like a flower, right? And the idea of opening that is the same idea as opening this. Well, in this case, what we're dealing with right here is we're dealing with the first chakra. And the first chakra, its expression is a 4-petal lotus. And the reason is because the 4-petal lotus of the first chakra connects you to the 4 directions on the earth. It connects you to the 4 elements: fire, air, earth, water, north, south, east, west, right? Like the base of a pyramid, pointing in each direction. Well, but the 5th point on that is also important. The 5th point is the point where those 4 come together. That's you. That's your body, right? And on a pyramid, it is the top of the pyramid. It's the center where all of the directions come together. And so if you're Hindu, you might relate to the root chakra and to physicality on the planet and our experience of physicality with this symbol, because it shows us in a position like a point. I'm here. I'm in the middle of the world. I'm experiencing the elements, right? But if you're a Druid, or if you're Wiccan, or if you're from a whole series of other Earth religions, that's the symbol that you're going to use. Why? Because in that symbol, you included the transcendent. You included yourself, which is transcendent to the four directions. You are the middle. It's you. And in this model, the you is included. And in vibration, in energy movement, you are always included. The transcendent is always included. The philosophical idea of the transcendent, it's always included in vibration. And let me share with you what I mean by that. You cannot do an experiment in science without your perception affecting that experiment. You are experiencing the answer. You are taking it in. You are writing down what it looks like. You are reading the dials. You are the human error element. There is no computer that has perfect data because it doesn't matter. You are still the one that's going to check and see if it's perfect or not. It's always going to come down to you on how everything is experienced. So though you are the thing receiving all of that information, you're receiving all of those senses, you're also included in the vibration. You are vibrating. You are the interpreter. You're always there. And you can't ever get away. And that is the idea of the transcendent. You can't ever get away. It's always there. It's always part of it. The yin and the yang is not two. It's three. Because those two things are always one. They're in a circle. They're one. The circle is the third thing, right? But the third thing is the two. Does that make sense? They're not separate. They're one. Just like in your experience, all these points might be part of your experience, but you are them. They're your experiences. You know, just like in the five-pointed star, you might have fire and air and earth and water, but inside of all of those is your experience of those, which some have called spirit, right? So can't ever get away from that. Now, physicality, this is our symbol that we're going to use to relate to physicality. This is the first layer, the point, as we were talking about. You know, the experience of the self, the thing that doesn't have to change, physical experience. Well, the reason that we're going to use this is because this is connected to the vibration of physicality, right? And interestingly enough, if we look throughout history, we see this symbol all the freaking over the place to talk about physical experience, right? Here you have the tetragrammaton, you know, the divine, and represented by the 5 elements, you know, which are actually the embodiments of the tetragrammaton into matter, right? Here you have the human body, and it's, you know, 4 legs, and the 5th, which is the head, the unifying point, you know? And up there you have like a Chinese model of elements interacting. Up there you have like a Masonic symbol. You know, over here you have a Celtic Druid symbol. You know, down here you have actually the transits of Venus going on around the sun, you know, and our relationship with Venus. And Venus is the closest planet to Earth, you know. It's our first sort of layer out besides the moon. And guess what? In its transits with the Earth, we make a perfect 5-pointed star. It's really amazing. And Venus is the goddess, Aphrodite, all dealing with sensuality, physicality, right? Physical, sensual experience, right? And is a goddess, and this happens to be a major symbol of goddess religions in the old ways, because the relationship between the self and the earth was often recognized as the earth, the physical macrocosm around you, being your mother, birthing you into existence, right? Emotionality. We're going to use this symbol. Why? Because, well, just like evolution, all you got to do to get to the next level is you just add 1, right? Because emotional experience is the same as physical experience. It's just experiencing fire, air, earth, and water, but those are hard, those are solid things, air, water, this is the earth, the fire is the heat in things, right? The blooming of the energy flowing through things. Well, all of that is the change of our physical experience, but our emotional experience, as we talked about, is in those things. It just happens to be a little more subtle, right? It's what we call the subtle body. And the subtle body is processing experiences, emotional experiences, through vibration, through color. It's not about the mass, because on the physical, it's the physical, this is earth. Of fire, that mass, that's fire, That's water, Here's the air. We tell these things by their mass, by their atomic nucleus, how it's arranged, how heavy is it, what's it made of, But emotional experience just takes the vibe, the vibration, and the change in time to experience, right? And all we need to do that is to understand the color, right? And there is one point missing to have the full spectrum of color in those 5. And the point that's missing is the orange point up there, right? Which is really interesting that it's orange because, when you go to the second chakra, guess what color pops out? In a lot of models, it's orange. Just like in the first, it's red, right? It's fire, birthing, rebirth, forest dies and is reborn through fire, right? It's hot, Physicality is like a hot thing. It's like, it's intense. Emotionality is way different, super subtle. It's kind of in between worlds, And interestingly enough, there's also color correlations that work inside of that system that match up with Chinese medicine and across the board. You begin to understand that the orange is wood and that air is also metal, and then you have fire and wood and metal and earth and water. And now you have the whole 5-element system in Chinese philosophy, because wood comes out of spirit. Because what's different about wood and metal and earth and water is that wood is alive. Wood is living. So the wood element is already a transcendent when we're talking about the physical. But on the emotional level, what the Chinese were talking about when they talk about wood is about growth and change and movement and really emotion. We're talking about emotionality. That's what wood in the heart is really about. And there's always spirit. There's always the you perceiving all of that, and so the you stays up top. And for the Chinese, the spirit was like air, and interestingly enough, the air point and the spirit point on this level are complementary, exact opposites, right, in the geometry. So, anyway, definitely the Chinese are not the only ones who have dealt with those elements. If you look here throughout history, here are all the examples of emotionality being represented through these different symbolic traditions, right? You get the evolution to the 6 within the Vitruvian Man, Judaism. You get the Star of David. Even in Christianity, you still have the representation of this. And what they're talking about when they use that symbol is an emotional connection with God, an emotional connection to the universe, right? This symbol represents emotionality, and guess what? In the Hindus, it's a 6-petal lotus. That's this level, this chakra, 6-petal lotus. And even here, on the dollar bill, you can see that same shape. But in this case, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you get 13. Kind of interesting. But we'll get there. Mentality. All right, so you have your emotional experience. It's flowing through the geometry of the fabric of space-time. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, this is also the exact structure of the fabric of space-time itself, right? Kind of a big thing to forget. The fabric of space-time, the structure of the fabric itself, is tetrahedral. Anybody ever seen the flower of life? All the circles that make other circles and connect? Well, that's it. That's the model. That gives you this symbol. And that is the form through which energy can travel throughout the universe, right? That's how the energy is built and how it is structured. Well, also, in physicality, right, all you're dealing with is basically that minus 1. And what happens when you pull away one of those points in the 6, the rest turn. They fold in and they begin to curve. And that creation of the beginning to curve is gravity. All gravity is curvature in space-time. Well, interestingly enough, it's mass that makes gravity. So when you take away a point on the 6, you just move energy out of equilibrium. Now that energy starts to compact, it starts to combine, it starts to become spherical. If you take a flat piece of paper made out of equilateral triangles and you pull one out, they start to fold until they become the Platonic geometry that we call the icosahedron, the sphere, right? So this is a symbol of gravity, of matter coming into form, right? That's actually what it is. That's what is actually happening with that geometry, right? And this is a symbol of the fabric of space-time itself, the equilibrium through which color and charge travel, right? And then this is something that doesn't fit in the fabric of space-time. When you add 1 to that, it's now more than 6. And you can't fit a 7th point into a 6-pointed equilibrium structure. And so what happens when you put the 7th point in, if you take out from a 6 and 1 and you leave a 5 there, and you try to push it through the fabric, it causes every other one to move. So what the mind is about, what mentality is about, is it's about movement and change and spin. The mind is actually radiating energy through space-time, causing the fabric to change, like a ripple. It pushes one point, which pushes a point, which pushes a point, which pushes a point, and that is the experience of spin. And this is actually the geometry of spin in space-time, okay? And so mentality is about creating orbits, creating structure, creating the change, right? And guess what? Mentally, we have a lot of people that are interested in how mental power works. The power of the mind. The ability to think and to hold structure over other people's minds, right? State Highway Patrol of California. Up here we have another Masonic symbol, really, really old one. This one is actually a form that shows the connection between the pentacle and the the heptagram, 7-pointed star. And that's one I made up there. This is the 7 days of the week, which is our weekly mental cycle, moving through the 7 planets that we can see in the sky, right? We can see 7. That's really special with our naked eye. Another old school alchemical symbol of the planets. So the idea is that even throughout history and throughout time, we've also had people mapping the mental changes that are going on and using these geometries to show what happens with the mind, with thought, how we create with thought, how we change things with thought, and that there's actually power to that thinking. The 7-pointed star is called the Virgin Star. And there's a reason for that. The reason it's called the Virgin Star, it's also called the Elven Star sometimes, but the reason it's called the Virgin Star is that you can't actually ever draw or even render with a computer a perfect 7-pointed star. It's impossible based on our circular degrees. All you can get is an approximation. But because the space between 2 angles in here, between this angle and this angle, because that space is actually an irrational number, It doesn't fit into a circle of 365 degrees, or 360 degrees, sorry. Because of that, you can never actually get it perfectly exact. It's always a slight approximation, right? Which is interesting. It's like you can't pin down the mind, you know? The mind doesn't want to be pinned down. So at this point, when we're talking about lotus petals, we get to the solar plexus, and the lotus petals of the solar plexus are 10, right? So we had 4 here, and we see how 4 can become 5 because you're the top of the pyramid. Right here we have 6, and we have 6, right? That makes sense, emotionality. Matches the fabric of space-time. And then here we have 7, but the lotus petals are 10. So what's missing? The mind is not quite complete yet, right? Something's missing to link this up with other systems. Well, first, you have your mind, the 7-pointed system. The mind is able to perceive your emotions, right? And then there's a stage where your mind is not only perceiving the vibration, the 7th point seeing the 6 colors changing and flowing, but then the mind starts to perceive the mind. And when the mind looks at the mind, when you see your own thoughts, that's the stream of thoughts that happened already in the past. You were thinking this, right? And the 8th point, like the infinity, stretches back as far as you can imagine into the past. So I'm moving through time, I'm thinking thoughts, and then I was like, oh, just a minute ago, I was just thinking about the 6-pointed star. And now I'm talking about 8 up here. And to get there, I moved through 7. You know, you're reflecting on the past of your mind's thought. And then the mind not only sees the mind that it had in the past, but the mind begins to witness that through the changes that happened in the past, the mind can actually project and perceive the choices and the changes that it's going to make in the future. That's the 9th point, right? That's seeing the future with your mind, okay? You can see that based on the path that you've walked, that in the future you're going to have to make a choice. When I go out and get in my car tonight, I'm going to have a choice to start that car or not. I have a choice when I get in the car of where I'm going to go. I start perceiving the choices that I have in the future. When I get home, am I going to eat or am I going to eat before I get home? I begin looking at my mind and how my experience might change based on what's going to happen to me in the future. And so I'm projecting out. I'm not just receiving the thoughts of what I was experiencing in the past. Now I'm projecting my own perceptions of choice into the future of my snake, so to speak, traveling through time. And then the 1 and the 0, the big 10, the 10th point, so to speak, the big 10-petal lotus that we're talking about for the solar plexus chakra, or belly chakra. The 10 is the 1 and the 0. That's where you become one in your self-awareness. I am present, I have my integration of the past, and I am creating the future. And I am a whole being. And that is what my mind is. I am 1, and everything else is 0. It is the nothing. I am the nothing and the 1, and I am the 1 and the nothing, right? It's you perceiving that you are a boundary condition. You're one being. You're one mind, right? And from that point, now you know you're one being, and you begin to experience other people. That's the moment when you experience someone else. There's you, and there's them. And that's 11. The pillars of Atlantis, the gateway point, the recognition of the totality of self and other, of duality, of yin and yang, of change. You begin to start over, now as a whole being, but now in relationship with other things, and not just yourself. And at this point, you come to the heart chakra. And the heart chakra is a 12-petal lotus, right? And these are 12 points, and this is what it looks like when you put together 12 points and you make a simplex. Simplex is basically a display where you show all the possible connections between all the points. Well, guess what? This simplex is actually a multi-dimensional figure. This holds 4D information. In fact, it can hold time information inside of it, mathematically. We found out that simplexes, these actual arrangements of 12 points in a circle, or 7 points in a circle, or 6 points in a circle, or even 5 points in a circle, and it doesn't happen before that, but it happens at 5, it happens at 6, at 7, and at points in progression all along there, but you begin to gain the capacity to model not only 3-dimensional information from a 2D surface, but 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional, 6-dimensional in some cases, 7, 8, 9, 10, and going on and on and on. In other words, this is able to hold more information than what you see. It's able to hold inside of it dimensional energy. In other words, it's able to contain experience through time. And that's what's going on in your chakras. Your chakras are a geometric structure that's built in a certain geometry that can actually hold information through time, like DNA. But it's happening electromagnetically and energetically inside your body. It's happening actually on the level of your space-time fabric. You're bending the space-time fabric around you, and it's organizing itself to your consciousness. And at the heart level, it's all about relativity. It's about my experience and your experience and our experiences of each other. And beautifully enough, with the 12 at this point, you also, oh, what happened? That was way ahead. Did not mean to do that. I'm going to rewind. Here we go. Okay. All right, yeah. Well, one last thing on this. We're talking about relativity and 12 and the 12 petals of the heart chakra lotus. And guess what? In astrology, you have 12 signs, 12 different archetypes of experience. And those archetypes experience are meant to help us understand how each other change and move through time, and actually understand your whole configuration as who you are. In the newer astrology, there's 12 planets too, including a couple asteroids like Ceres and Chiron, and basically we're beginning to see a pattern in our astrology to understand basically how we are relating and being relative to each other as we move through space-time, right? And then we go to the throat chakra, and at this point, we've got to get from 12 up to 16 petal lotus. Well, how does that happen? Well, with the 12, there's me, right? And then the 13 is like the center point of the 12 where I am one with all of you. And then the 14 is where my oneness meets you again. And then the 15 is the point where I begin starting to relate to you as your own physical being. So it's 5 and 5 and 5. In other words, my physical being and your physical being begin to interact. And the interaction between my physical geometry and your physical geometry has a communication, the third geometry. And that communication is what is interconnecting us. So our throats are actually vibrating the structure of what it means to relate to each other as physical beings. I have a physical being. Here's my 5. You have a physical being. You've got one of these too. And we're talking, and all the interactions between our physical beings is the third 5. And that is the vibration of our throat. Our throat chakras are actually holding the total complexity of our entire communicative experience, right? Really freaking cool. And the 16th point in that case is the 1. It's the Om. It's the totality of sound. It's where all the sound becomes one. All the different sounds that we can make, right? And then we get up, that's where you have communicability. It's 15 points right there in the simplex. Got 3 things in interconnection now, right? Me, you, the other, and our union together, our communication together, right? It's how communication works. And then we go up to the third eye. And at this point, we're getting to the two-petal lotus. What's the two-petal lotus about, right? We go, what, 4, 6, 10, 12, 16, 2? What's that about? Well, the 2 is actually 2 nines. And each 9 is a representation of that edge of consciousness before everything becomes one. The 9 is like the spiral into the infinite, right? And one of those 9s represents the infinite yin, and the other 9 represents the infinite yang, right? And if you look at 2 9s and you put them together, guess what? You actually get a yin and yang. You also get a 69, but we're not here to talk about that today in this workshop. So the 2 9s is the yin and the yang, and it's the yin and the yang that come together to make the whole of all vibrational experience, all change in experience, everything you experience and that others experience. This is the universal level, the 6th level, where everything is a whole, right? And at this level, what we're talking about is 666, because not just 2 9s make this chakra here, but 2 9s make 18, right? And 18 is made up of 666. And now we have a pattern, right? Wait a second. Did you just say 666 like 3 times? Wait a second. What is this workshop I'm in? What is this guy talking about? Okay. Let me just address something for you. If your third eye, your ability to see the wholeness of all things, to interpret the differences between all types of beings, to actually develop psychic abilities and witness synchronicity and see through time and gain metaphysical power and consciousness and awareness and be able to truly interpret how other people are feeling, if you believe that the geometry that sources all of that is evil, what happens? I mean, really? Like, you're going to block it, aren't you? If I believe that the 5-pointed star, the pentacle, represents the devil, and the pentacle is the vibrational geometry of my connection to the planet, what's going to happen to the planet? Any of this sounding familiar? I mean, look what we're doing to the planet right now, right? Look what we did to all of the very intuitive, amazing psychic healers, the witches, over like centuries. We killed them. We burned them. We literally have been burning and killing off our own psychic ability. Why? Because we thought 666 was evil, and it happens to be the vibrational energy of our third eye chakra. And we thought the 5-pointed star must be evil because it's how we communicate to the planet. How we communicate to our physical beings. No wonder our health has been so fucked up. Excuse my French. 666 is not evil. It's actually the vibration of your third eye chakra, and it's a pretty good thing to reclaim. And the reason it's 666 is because 16 is your emotional experience, your spectrum of energy that you're feeling in your interaction with the fabric of space-time. And another 6 is the other person's feeling and vibration in interaction with the fabric of space-time. And your 2 feelings and vibrations come together and have a union, which is the space between us, where we're interpenetrating each other and vibrating with each other right now in this room, even across the distance of this live stream broadcast. And we are in communion. We are in oneness with each other. And it is beautiful. It's super amazing. And in fact, because my third eye is able to process all the consciousness and the information of that, I'm able to actually see through the live stream to someone on the other side and have a sense of how they're feeling. I actually have the ability, just like you do, just like everyone else on the planet, to think about someone and get a sense of how they feel. Have you ever thought about your mom and been like, I wonder how mom is? Oh man, I've been feeling my mom today. I don't know. I feel like I need to give her a call. Why? Well, that's because of this geometry in your body is enabling you to interpret the emotional energy that's going on somewhere else in space-time. This is one of those wormholes coming out of your body. This is one of your major wormholes, and it's able to connect to whatever you want. It's pretty freaking awesome. Finally, we talk about the crown up here. I illustrated with a little darker purple just for, spirituality. This is still the 18. And notice that the 18 points all make a single point in the middle. Isn't that awesome? It's just like union right there. Right? Call that kind of the spiritual level. So then what happens? Right? We had 555 from physical experience, mine, yours, and ours, giving the throat. Excuse me, Mr. Microphone. And then we had the 666, my 6, your 6, and our 6 together, making the third eye. And then we have the my mind, your mind, and our mind together, which make the crown chakra. And that's the entry to the crown chakra. Because the crown chakra has 1,000 petals to its lotus. Well, that's because the mind is pretty infinite. Because when you start dealing with my mind and all my perceptions of my emotions and all of my thoughts about myself through the past and all things I've experienced through the past and everything that I'm going to experience in the future and all the choices that I'm going to have, and then you add that to all of your experiences now, in the past, in the future, and then the interaction between everything I've ever been and everything you've ever been with everything we're going to be forever, you kind of get some infinite. That's where it becomes the 1,000, which really just represents infinity. So the crown chakra is built to open up to the infinite possibilities of all things. That was the 7th layer we talked about that started with the big question mark. It's like, where do we go from here? Well, that's what the infinite mind is. It's the question in every moment of where do we go from here? But the first level of it is just being aware that your thoughts and other people's thoughts are connected. As soon as you realize that my mind and your mind are part of the same mind, suddenly now you're talking about big words like God. How can everything I am and everything you are be part of the same everything? That's big. That's like eternal stuff and infinite stuff and like, whoa. And guess what our biggest lucky number in the world is? 777, baby. You know, you win the lottery, you're just like, yeah, 777. It's infinite, right? It's the connection. It's opening up to that infinite ability, infinite power that we have, infinite consciousness that we have when we open up our crown chakra and we let that eternal, infinite mystery of the singularity come through. So I like to call that one the singularity. And I love when you look at the middle of this one, the simplex here, it's like just cusps around that core right there, and it just leaves the core totally open. It's like this space for infinite possibilities to come in. Beautiful geometry. So that's the journey through the chakras. And the journey through the chakras is basically about understanding this. And this is the Unified Harmonic Matrix. This is what I created. And this is how it works. You have dimensions from the point, physicality, to line, to the plane, to the sphere, to the torus, to the wormhole, and back to the implosion of the wormhole into oneness, right? And each one of those layers directly relates to a vibrational layer, a vibrational experience in consciousness, which have been modeled by different cultures throughout time. Earth religions, physical-based religions, use the 5-pointed star. Emotional religions and emotional magical teachings use the 6-pointed star, relating to magic and energy and space-time. Mental religions, like Christianity, used 7 as their magic number. The 7-pointed stars, 7 apostles, 7 days when God created the earth, right? And then you have our relational energy, where things like astrology came out to describe our relational energy to each other. And then we have the geometries of communication, collective physicality, the geometries of our spiritual connection with each other, collective emotionality, and the geometries of singularity or our communion with the divine mind, right? And across the board, here you got the vibration, its vibrational expressions through colors, and you have the nucleus of an atom, nucleus of a cell, the nucleus that is the body and the whole planet. And then you have the moon, the emotional layer of the moon, the whole energy body, the whole cell, and the whole atom, all vibrating, and that vibration giving us emotional experience. The mental layer, where molecules are structures that form the forms of our mind, and the spin and the radiance, the energy of our mind, tissues forming the structures of our mind, art and expression and what we do around us being the reflection of our minds, and the solar system being the collective reflection of our mental structure. Then on the interpersonal level, or the heart level, now we're talking about DNA, purpose, and information, relationship between information to create purpose. And then you have organs that each take on their individual purpose in their relationship with each other. Bodies, whole people, me and you, having relationship together. And then the whole galaxy, the model of relationship coming into oneness as a whole star system. Chromosomes communicate information between cells. Organ systems communicate information between parts of the body. Cultures communicate with each other, which develops life and consciousness and ways of being on Earth. Galaxies communicate with each other through galactic clusters. And then you end up with the cell nucleus up there, which is where we started down here, which is the whole of our totality of our experience physically, but also our whole of our experience, all those chromosomes coming together into one thing that can make anything in our body. To our whole body, which is everything that we are, to the whole earth, which is everything that is our experience here, and to the whole universe, which is everything that models everything that's ever been, right? All of those things are models of our communion, our connection, our wormhole interconnectivity with everything, that we're fractals with everything. And beyond that, the whole cell is an infinite. All kinds of cells come into being in infinite varieties. And the body has infinite creations through its energy field, infinite planets, and the infinityverse. Universes upon universes. Who knows what's next, right? And each of those layers interconnects all the way up. So we go from the base, we go up to the top, and then by the 6th layer, we're here, and we go to here, and then we go up, bump, 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 bump. You get to the body and the energy body, and you're right here. Body, energy body. You go up, bump, bump, bump. You get to planet, and then the infinite planets. Planet, the Earth-Moon system is our experience of the infinite planets we're a part of. Solar system, blah, 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 universe, all the way up, right? So it's a way just simply for us to see clearly how we are fractally interconnected with everything, and actually that we aren't just metaphorically a hologram. We are a freaking hologram. We are a total, complete hologram of consciousness, okay? And one of the really, really exciting leaps that happened recently was my friend Nassim Harmine and I finally got to sit down back last spring and go super deep on these geometries. And what we realized and what we worked out was that the model that I'd created here, and specifically these first 3 geometries, which are the base system for the rest, those 3 geometries are not only symbolic of these processes They are the actual geometries mathematically in his system, and that he's like right now revolutionizing physics through, for gravity, the fabric of space-time, and this is how it curves with gravity, and spin, which is 7, the actual geometric representation of how spin works in the fabric of space-time. So it's really exciting. We now have the geometric codes that were already in our bodies, that were already parts of us, to basically interface with the fabric of space-time and change it. In other words, we can begin changing gravity. We can begin changing the fabric of space-time around us because we know the geometric and energetic program that it's running with. And guess what? The program is our consciousness. This is something we've known forever. We are the embodiment of the program. But all you have to do is take the map of our body, take the map of what you're made of, the map of your chakras, of your consciousness, of your energy body, and when you take that and you apply that externally, you can get some really, really cool things. You can do magic. You can make spectral fields spin and create wording and manifest things and do really, really cool stuff, right, with your life that, you know, people in The Secret talk about, but that you can do on even cooler levels because you know how to address the geometric root of what you want to create. Oh yeah. What happens when you start learning how to control gravity and actually interface with the fabric of space-time? Well, you learn how to create gravitational fields. So you learn how to create an internal gravitational field that can sustain life and energy and balance inside a spacecraft. You learn how to create an equilibrium that allows the gravitational field to be negated around a craft, right? Like a bubble, you know? And then you learn also how to tell the space-time around the craft where you're located relative to the surrounding space around you. So you can begin telling the space-time fabric, actually, I'm at this point relative to this pulsar near this star system, and the space-time fabric doesn't know any different. It's just a computer. It's just a flow of energy. You tell it where you are, and then you're there. And that is how these systems work. That is how these starships work, and we can do some really cool stuff with it. I'm actually going to be doing a talk in 2 weeks here on the 19th, and then also in Asheville at UNCA on specifically this, on spacecraft, on replicators, and zero-point energy systems, and exactly what the functional processes are to approach creating them, making them happen, and then the major effects that happen on a planetary scale of our societal changes, cultural changes. How are we going to be living when we have ships that can travel instantaneously to other star systems? What are we going to do when we can replicate anything into anything? We can take dirt and make it gold. We can make lead gold. We can transform this. We can make a smoothie out of the fabric of space-time itself. And you can drink it, just like in Star Trek. You walk up to the thing and you're like, do, 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 I want a coffee. It's like, da, 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 da. And you drink. What happens? And what happens to our economic system? You know? What's the next level? We're all protesting the huge problems right now. We all are inside really, really sick and tired of the way things have been. Well, guess what? On every single level of human society and culture, technologically, socially, biologically, energetically, across every field and every magazine, we are at the cutting edge of something so big and so new and so fresh, most people haven't even conceived of what it's going to look like yet. But everybody has seen what it's going to look like. If you've ever watched Star Trek, if you've ever watched some of the awesome science fiction movies where they actually had the balls to believe that we could travel faster than light, right? What happens then? What doors does that open? And how do we face those doors without fear? And how do we engage with other cultures out there in a way that's balanced and in a way that understands that they are coming from an entirely different planet with their own perceptions and structures of how they relate to consciousness, to reality, to the universe. And maybe there's a universal model that we can use to help communicate with them. And maybe that's based on geometry. Maybe that's based on the basic energetics of how life comes into being and expresses itself. And maybe they're not going to look that different than us. If physicality and physical geometry likes to form itself like this, I imagine there's some pretty similar beings out there to us when it comes to the state of consciousness that we're in. But I'm going to talk about a lot of that in a couple weeks. But the exciting thing is that we're going to be doing it. We're on the next level. And we can use these kinds of ideas. We can use these geometric forms and structures. We can use color models based on them. We can use the harmonic understanding of like how different pieces in the whole universe fit together to do stuff like organizational modeling. We can kind of change our collective structure and start to organize with each other in more coherent and more available ways just by understanding that our energetic bodies in our being naturally organize in certain ways. So we can naturally organize with each other in certain ways as well. We can also design new networks and new systems to how to network. Been working on a project called the Core Network for a few years now with others that's based on basically modeling interactivity between people using color and geometry. Imagine if you took the whole internet and you could categorize anything on the internet into one of those 7 layers, or not just one, but multiple ones, and found the strongest harmonics that something had, its strongest colors, and then we're able to navigate through information on the web by color. Imagine how much faster you could navigate to what you're looking for. Instead of looking through the blue links and text on a page and having to read every word, you're like, oh, all right. No, just that one color, I want it related to this, related to this. You know, we got to change our interface if we're going to start working like a galactic species and not just like a slow, chunky, you know, Web 2.0 species. And then healing arts, of course. Barbara Ann Brennan, again, I mentioned, and there's a lot of other amazing books out there on energy healing to understand the human body, the human system, and you can learn how to connect the energies of the macrocosm and the microcosm and deal with illnesses actually on extremely specific levels, down to the energetic vibration in molecules themselves. We're talking about addressing things like iron deficiencies, things like cancer, and actually identifying the processes in the cell that are keeping energy from moving by not only looking at one cell and the cancer happening in it, but looking at that as basically a microcosm that is also matched in atoms themselves. What's going on with the atoms and the electromagnetic charge of those atoms? What's going on in the electromagnetic field of the person's body, right? That's one way we can immediately address cancer. And if we look up all the way up to the body level, you're talking about body and the energy field. And body and energy field is the same as the cellular level. So you have to look across the planes, and then maybe we can start actually using moon cycles to track processes of change in cancer. Because all of those things are happening on the same harmonic level inside our bodies, right? It's the second and third, you know, cells and tissues. And we can start to zoom in and really address where illnesses and where problems are happening and actually address them in a holistic way across every scale and recognize how to heal them through the processes happening on those scales. So anyway, this is my website, adamapollo.info. You can go there and you can read more about Unified Harmonic Matrix, and if it wasn't enough information for you already. But I also do a lot of things like Jedi training intensives, movement, martial arts training. I do a lot of organizational development work. I consult with groups. I just recently got back from the United Nations where I participated in basically a youth leader conference where a bunch of leaders, mostly of nonprofit organizations and philanthropists from around the world, were coming together to discuss social change and the biggest things needed to happen to change things on the planet. And I did that at the White House last year with a small group of people, went in, spoke with White House advisors, and helped to address the big changes happening in the world. So what's happening right now is some really, really fantastically huge stuff on the planet. If you look at Occupy Wall Street, you can see it. I mean, just to give a little bit of current report on the news, I don't know if you guys were aware of this yesterday, but the Marines actually went down and have been showing up at the Occupy places to protect the protesters from the police. So the Marines are now part of the protest, and they're standing for this whole situation where we're protesting the failing of our entire economic system and the absolute total corruption that's been happening between corporate systems and our government. And that address is really, really major. Airline pilots went down there. Hundreds of airline pilots showed up. We're looking at basically the end of the economic system as we know it, and the end of the governing system as we know it. We are now an interconnected people across the entire planet. We have instantaneous communication and connections with each other. I can call anyone, anywhere in the world from my phone right here, right now, and not only talk to them, but show you their faces while they're talking to me with this phone, right? We have incredible technology, and we're just scratching the surface of how to use it. And we're about to have some pretty revolutionary stuff like starships and replicators and new energy systems, and we're gonna have to remodel how we do our entire social structures of relating on this planet. We're gonna have to start accounting for the fact that we're not alone in this universe, and maybe there's a lot of other species that have already kind of figured out this step in their evolution, and maybe we should ask them for some help. Maybe we should actually engage with them. Maybe we should put ourselves out there and be crazy like UFO cats and go out in the middle of the desert and build some giant sacred geometry-shaped city and turn on all the rainbow lights and all our sound systems and say, no, we don't want any more economic system, we don't need any money, and dance ourselves to the stars and hope that some starships come and land, which perhaps they will. But that's for another story. That's it for my talk tonight. Thank you all so much for coming. Honored to have you here, and thank you to everyone on the live stream, and aloha. Thank you. Awesome. So is there any questions before I close up? Awesome. Yes. Soak it in. Soak it in. It's time to absorb. Yeah, takes a little while to get it all in. You guys took good notes, though. Bravo. Takes work taking on those. Like, oh my God, what's it talking about? Oh, we gotta look at the thing. I can't even read this card. The text is so freaking small. What the frick? No, it's not meant to be like read, you know. It's meant to be glanced at and kind of pull out little symbolic elements and look at the geometries and stuff like that, you know. But the information's all on the website too. You can go there, and I mean, most of it's on the website. I haven't actually finished putting in all of the information about the higher dimensional chakras. Even though I have all the graphics made, I haven't finished, you know, writing out the microdata. Mm-hmm. Well, up to here, and then I talk about basically what happens, you know, when you extend beyond here to other chakras, is you're basically just dimensionally ratcheting. In other words, just like from here coming up, by the time you get here, you've already got harmonic connections linking back down to here. Actually, you do by this point, because at this point you're geometrically already resonating with the 5, and then the 6, and then the 7. And you've already got your physical, emotional, and mental, and you have collective physical, emotional, and mental experience. And beyond that, there's not really much else that's going on. You gain new perspectives in how time works and how future and past work. You know, the Trinity comes into play always. But it's just really like deeper and more complex ways of looking at the different geometric combinations, which are really just, you know, either a physical, emotional, mental experience, a combination of those experiences, and they're interfacing by either looking at the past, looking at the future, looking at the present moment, or seeing an integration of those. And really with that, you get everything. I mean, there is nothing beyond that. It's just you get to the infinite, So for a lot of people that like to talk about, like, well, what about the 12th chakra? And I want to go up to that dimension. Like, well, if you want to look at the 12th chakra, how many petals does it have? What's its vibration? What's its geometry? And if you want to look at that, you have to start looking at the pattern in the geometries. So you have 5, 6, 7, right? And then you go to 12. Well, that's 2 6s, right? And then you have 5, 6, 7 again, but this is with trinities. So 3 5s, 3 6s, 3 7s. So we go 1, 5, 6, 7 to 2 6s, 3 5, 6 7s, And there's the trinity there. And then from then on, you can go to 4 5 6 7s or 4 6s, and then you can go to 5 5 6 7s and look at those geometries. And then you can go to 6 5 6 7s and to 7 5 6 7s, and you can keep going infinitely. And as you look at those geometries, the thing about the 5 6 7 is it allows it to ratchet down to our basic experiences in space-time. So you have the capacity to interpret the different permutations that are going on there. But what happens in between, like 7, for example, 8, 9, 10, that's the processes of past, future, and integration in the present. So you can relate to the 8, 9, 10 through those processes. And then if you go below the 5, 6, 7, you have 0, you have 1, which anything with the 1 is the 1, right? So it's self-reflective. And then you have 2, 3, and 4. And 2 is basic relationship, always. You're always doubling, you're always relating in a basic relational structure. 3, you're always understanding the balance between a relationship and a union. And 4, you're always stepping into creation. In other words, you're dealing with 2 pairs, or 3 forming a trinity, and the 1, which is the tetrahedral 4th point, right? So you can read the 4s into the system too, if you want to. But every time you read a 4 into the system, it's kind of like a grid work that leads to the 5. It's like the base element that's going to get you into the 5 anyway. So it's interesting. So you can model things with all the other numbers as well, but I've done this like endlessly. It's been 10 years checking the system against every other system and mapping out all the geometries and studying the mathematics and studying like, okay, what are the missing pieces? Where do the things fit in here? And I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole a long, long way. But even after 10 years of testing and exploring and studying, what I always come back to is that this system is basic and it's fundamental to our conscious experience. And everything else that you go to is an abstraction in some way or another. It's just really looking with the mind at a different formula that's inside of that structure. It's like I can look at it this way, or I can look at it this way. But what I've realized is that I can actually see all the way around just by using the model of my own being, which is a model of the fabric of space-time. That's all it is. It's just the universe. You're already made to study everything in every possible way you can imagine. So it's about integrating that, and the geometric work is just a part of that. So, yeah. Any other questions?
I've been studying the seams work closely, and
Nice.
you kind of get into it pretty in depth very quickly.
Yeah.
And you go over this point about 10 to the 80th protons in the
Yeah.
universe, which you like brush over pretty quickly and might want to take a moment to
Sure.
expand that. 10 to the 80th, the number is of this order of magnitude.
Yeah.
And it counts actually for every single atom in every single star and every single galaxy that we can conceivably see.
Yeah. You just grab the mic there. Yeah.
And then you go on to say that the 10 to the 40th is half of that, but it's actually 10 to the 40th is actually 10 to the 40th times 10 to the 40th is 10 to the 80th.
Right. Right.
One infinitesimal fraction.
Right. It's the square root of that. Right. Yeah.
10 to the 40th. When people don't understand these numbers, though, and to extract, to maybe take a moment, it's hard to explain that.
Right.
10 to the 40th, if you know math, people who do understand it know it's an unbelievably huge number. And
Yeah.
80th is this number that's, anyway.
Yeah, 80 zeros after a 1, I mean, that's a lot of zeros. It's like, yeah,
unifying our understanding of the physical manifestation of the physical matter of our universe that we're existing.
totally.
And I think it's really question what I just thought. And then the other thing is when you talk about chakras,
Yeah.
to maybe just also explain a little bit more, which I'm still struggling with understanding them, as to the word that is coming from India, and that it is these rotating energy systems in our body,
Yeah,
which a lot of us do know and have been studying and working with, which is
totally.
thought was trying to access.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I certainly try to give a little base on the origin of that, but in terms of, for the purpose of the talk, it's a little bit interesting for me to focus on the geometries themselves. But yes, absolutely, those geometries that I'm showing, I'm actually showing as the geometry of the energy that's going into a vortice inside of your body. You know, in the front and in the back, energy spinning in, coming in the top, coming in your throat, and in the back, and that the shape of that geometry, the actual format for the way energy is spinning in. Remember back in that one slide where I showed you it looked like the flower with the phi spirals going around it, right? Now imagine one of those for all of those really high-level geometries, and that's a map of kind of like all the points and how the energy is spiraling into the chakra. There's models for those geometries out there, and I actually want to make some vector ones myself. I've been meaning to do it for a couple years now, but yeah, you just take the phi spiral and you just connect it to all those points in the 18 and just watch how it overlays. And it creates some crazy like waveform effects and stuff. My friend Marshall Lefferts loves making those, and he has tons of them, and he's overlaid them over flowers and, you know, the eye, and he's shown in Marshall's system, he's a director for the Resonance Project, so he's a director for Nassim Haramein's foundation. And what he's been working on is showing that when you do those phi flowers, in other words, with the phi spiral, you actually can see a point in the inner space where the event horizon of its black hole is. There's a point where the lines create a massive amount of density like a barrier and then open up again. And he's been saying that point, and is looking at the geometry of the fabric around a singularity, that point, that zone is where the singularity is. Or sorry, the event horizon is. An event horizon is the point, you know, around a black hole where once energy goes inside of it, it doesn't come back out. It radiates in a different way. It's basically becomes part of the black hole, so to speak. So, and that's the point. The event horizon is also the point where the black hole's energy is all radiating off from. That's where we see energy coming off of a black hole, is at the event horizon, because we can't see inside of that. So, any other questions? All right, cool. Let's cruise. You can cut it. Thank you, guys. Yeah. All right, let's kill it. I know I live up in Marina.